Hey, Tyler. I've been wondering for a while, I've been meaning to ask you for a couple decades, why do you always wear plaid?
Plaid is in. I mean, come on, I gotta stay style. Wait. Oh no. Plaid is out. Plaid is out. Plaid is out.
Plaid is out. This is
Oh,
humiliating.
oh. Okay. There we go. There we go. All right.
Oh,
I'm all good now.
you're very in. This is a
Thank
very
you.
in look.
Yes. Yeah. Three-quarter zip. Very fashionable now.
Oh, I'm in trouble. This is a full zip. This is humiliating. I'm going to get torn apart in the tabloids, but it won't be the first time. Hello and welcome to Woeful Wednesdays. Nathan reads a series of unfortunate events. Ignore the tattoo. We are looking at book the sixth already. And so
Yeah.
this is the Ersatz elevator. And specifically, we are looking at chapters 1 to 4. My name is Nathan.
And I'm Tyler.
So if you are new to this, I am reading through the series for the first time. Tyler has read the series a couple times before, and you first encountered the series when you were a middle grade reader. And so you're kind of that target age when you first read the books, and I'm not when I'm first reading the books, and we are doing weekly videos on these as we go through the books together. Now, we do have a sponsor for today. Our sponsor is Cafe Salmonella, serving meals that your body won't soon forget. Try the Listeria Linguine.
Yes, absolutely. I do believe it is pronounced salmonella, but I don't know.
I don't know either. I'm not sure. This is going to be the second time that I'm humiliated on my own BookTube channel. So there you, there you go. But I don't know. I think that's how you get internet famous, right? You either have to
Right.
be really competent or really incompetent.
Yeah, yeah. I hope that was a competent quick change.
I
I am
think
a
so.
quick change artist at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, folks. I hope you enjoy. Ignore the tattoo! Nathan unfortunately reads a series of unfortunate events at an unfortunate age, which in this case is being used to indicate that he is entirely too old to be reading this for the first time. All right, so we were talking about book the sixth, the Ersatz elevator, and this is on chapters 1 to 4. So I've got plot summary duty for this week. So we have Mr. Poe driving the children to go to their new guardian's home, and so they are back in their home city. They haven't been there in a while, and we still don't get a name for the city, but they are
I think it's
on.
called the community or this community.
Right. So they travel down to Dark Avenue and they end up at 667 Dark Avenue. It is exactly like what it sounds like. It is very, very dark with a canopy of trees, and there's not really much lighting that's getting through or lights on the street itself. And then they can barely even see the doorway to the building that they're going to. Somebody says, "Hey, the door's over here," because it's a doorman. They go in, and this is a skyscraper. It is either, what is it? Either 44 or 88 or something like that.
Either 48 or 84.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
So floors in height. All that they know is that they're going to the penthouse, and so they just climb the stairs until they get to the very top. Mr. Poe bails out because he has got to go on a 3-week helicopter tour of a mountain peak to try to find the Quagmire children because he is chasing a lead. He's been told
Yes.
that
Yes.
they're
Well, I mean, he just got a promotion, so he
right.
uh, he is now in charge of the Quagmire situation as well.
Exactly, yes. And so because of that, then he definitely needs to go chasing after them because if it wasn't associated with his job, then who cares about those orphan triplets?
Yep.
Um, so yes, he's
Yes.
got he doesn't have time for climbing these stairs, so he of course doesn't even see them off to their next guardians, and the elevator is not working. Or it's been removed because elevators are out. They're not trendy or fashionable anymore. So the
Yep.
Baudelaires, they have to climb and climb and climb and climb and climb. And then when they get to the top, then it's great because they meet what's their last name? It's Jerome and Esme, but what's their last name?
Squalor.
Squalor. Right.
which they are
So
certainly not living in squalor.
no, they're not. They're not. So Jerome is a great dude, and Esme is vapid, vain, and no fun at all. So
Mhm.
that's basically it. The condo, apartment, whatever it is, the penthouse that they're in is the biggest penthouse in the history of the world. It's how many rooms? It's like 70 something rooms, right?
Yeah, 70 something bedrooms, I think.
Right.
That's not including however many living rooms, kitchens, rooms that seem to have no purpose at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, they end up there, and it's a pretty good setup considering some of the places that they've been in. There
Yeah.
is a library, and so Klaus has got the room next to the library, and then Violet has got a room. Is it her bedroom has got the work table, the workbench, or is it
Yeah.
the room next to her does?
I believe her bedroom does.
Yeah, so it seems all right, and then they're well taken care of. The issue is it's so big, it's so sprawling that they get lost at times, and
Yeah.
that's somehow terrible. It's one of these things that Violet keeps getting lost in the place. I'm like, okay, we've pointed this out before. Their intelligence wavers depending on how convenient it is to the plot,
Right.
but anyway,
I mean, that's always been my criticism of mansions, though. I'm like, I don't want a place where like I can't get from one end to the other without getting lost.
without getting lost. I Yeah, I
I
don't
mean,
know.
I'm being a bit facetious with that, but
I guess that's the advantage of going senile. Then even a small place can become a mansion. You get lost in your one bedroom apartment.
right.
What a sprawling pad I've got.
Oh, I've never seen this room before.
What great stuff. Whoever lives here has got great taste. Uh, yeah, so then really like there's not a whole lot that happens beyond this. It's really what's the big event is that there's going to be this auction. Is it the inn auction? Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so Esme is really excited for this because you find out this is really where their wealth has come from. She runs these auctions and she sells off all of the things that are in and trendy, and then she makes all of the money from it. And orphans are
It was
very
a
in.
very good cause.
Yes, yeah. And orphans are very in, which is why she wanted to adopt them or become their guardian.
Mhm.
And then
But
the
apparently, Jerome wanted to adopt them from the second he heard about the incident.
right,
Uh,
because according to the rules of how the will was written, or at least how Mr. Poe interpreted it, then it had to go to their nearest relative, right? Their
yeah.
closest relative. Was that it?
Yes, their closest
Closest
living
living
relative.
relative. And
Yeah.
so he was thinking that's about geographical distance and
Hmm.
not closest in terms of lineage. And therefore, these people living in the same city, the community, would have been the closest living relatives.
I presume that they are not actually related. Jerome talks about the Baudelaire mother being a friend of his.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
All right. And anyway, this guy is going to be helping with the auction, Gunther or Gunter.
Yes.
I don't know because
Yeah.
he's got an accent, so I wonder if he does go with Gunter. But
Right. Yeah. I'd go
and
with Gunther.
yeah, Gunther, and he shows up, and it dun da 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 is Count Olaf in disguise, and the orphans, of course, see through this right away, and Esme thinks that that's crazy talk, and Jerome is like, oh, it might be true, but I guess what we'll do then to deal with it is we'll just slide down a banister.
Yeah, that'll make you feel better.
Yeah, I think I covered it, right? Is that basically it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it is. Honestly, this is probably one of my favorites in the entire series. This book, um, just the idea of Esme being, so vain and all about what's trendy and what's in, and I love it because it's such a great critique of it.
Yes. Yes, it is. It is. So let's get into this. So starting with chapter 1,
Mhm.
then it does it at first, then you do have a pretty good joke here. This is on the first page where it says,
Absolutely.
the book you're holding in your two hands right now, assuming that you are in fact holding this book and that you have only two hands, is one of two books in the world that will show you the difference between the word nervous and the word anxious. I do appreciate that it's assuming you have only two hands. It's a good
Yes,
joke. It's a good joke.
absolutely. I had the same thing marked.
Yeah. And then he gets into what I can only describe as a trivial distinction between nervous and anxious.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
I
Uh,
it's not funny.
no,
It's not helpful.
mm-mm.
It's not entirely accurate either.
Yeah, yeah, the only way that he, um, I guess, explains it away is by having Mr. Poe being confused by it as well. But yeah, that's it. It is a very trivial distinction that is, yeah,
The
not
only
particularly helpful.
the only thing that I can think is that it children can read this and they can then have something over an adult, and that can
Right.
be fun for kids when they feel like they know something that adults don't know, and it's not
Yeah.
something that's like, oh, they know something about a cartoon or whatever else that they're into, a toy or something like that, some schoolyard game. But instead, if they know something that belongs to the adult world that adults don't know, that an adult doesn't know the distinction, I feel like a lot of kids would read this and they would then ask their mom or dad, they'd say, do you know what the difference is between nervous and anxious? And then like,
Oh, they mean the same
right. It's
thing.
like, no, they don't. Actually, right? I feel like kids would really enjoy that. And
Yes.
so I wonder if that's why he does it. But
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then on page 13, my next note for chapter 1, it's really, this is like the beginning of it. I guess we've had a couple mentions of it prior to this, but well, really going from chapter 12 to or page 12 to the top of chapter 13 or page 13 is the doorman says, just in, the doorman explained, around here people decide whether something is in, which means it's stylish and appealing, or out, which means it's not, and it changes all the time. Why, just a couple of weeks ago, dark was out and light was in, and you should have seen this neighborhood. You had to wear sunglasses all the time, or you'd hurt your eyes. Dark is in, huh? Mr. Poe said. Wait until I tell my wife. In the meantime, could you show us where the elevator is? Mr. and Mrs. Squalor live in the penthouse apartment, and I don't want to walk all the way up to the top floor. And that's the first instance of it. And then it continues on, and you get more and more examples of this.
Hmm.
And you're right that it is a, I mean, I don't want to say that it's a really incisive critique of it.
Hmm.
For children, though, who are reading this, certainly for middle grade readers, if they don't really know what that is, like with fashion and what's in and what's out, this is
Right.
pretty good. It's a pretty good description of it. But I don't
Hmm.
know that it even needs something more incisive than this. Like, I just don't
Yeah.
think, like, I don't know. I've heard people justify it before. I've watched The Devil Wears Prada multiple times. I've heard that speech from Meryl Streep's character where she talks about how fashion does impact your life and different shades of color, arise out of the minds of designers and then, fashion critics who determine what's in and what's not. And like, it's just, I still don't have much patience or interest for like the, I don't know.
The trends.
Yeah, and like it's not even that, and this is just like whatever. This is my booktube channel. This is my YouTube channel. I can say whatever I want. This is supposed to be like my personality, so I'll just share. I'm fine if you're into that and if you're into like following the trends and things like that. But I've never heard anybody defend it in any way other than it's just arbitrary. That it's
Yeah.
just some people who somehow have insisted that they have the best taste
Yeah.
decide collectively somehow that things will be in or out. I have no issue with fashion. but I think that fashion should be up to individuals,
Mm-hmm.
not some, fashion influencer or critic or whatever,
Yeah.
who then tells people what colors are in or what cuts of fabric are in for certain seasons, and then they're out of fashion and then you're not supposed to wear it. I think that each individual should just develop their own style, and your
Yeah.
style can change over time and with the seasons and whatever. But the idea that you're going to just listen to somebody else, I'm like, talk about having no independence or critical thinking skills, that you just like, tell me what to think and what to wear and I'll wear that. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, as we joked about during the intro, then I always wear a plaid overshirt,
Right.
and that's just my particular style. That's what I'm most comfortable in, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, I'm fine with, I like the idea of having more variety where people wear
Right.
different stuff. The idea that,
Yes.
everybody should be paying attention to this. I'm like, how boring.
Yes. Absolutely. Um, yeah. Yeah, no,
So,
it is. It's something that I love about this book, because you're right that it's not really particularly incisive or anything, but the idea of, oh, it's suddenly changed. We have to make sure that nobody sees us, like wearing last season's clothes,
yeah.
essentially. Um, yeah,
And I,
it's
I
just
know I know people like that.
right.
They get rid of their wardrobes and they just cycle through stuff. It's crazy. They get rid of crazy amounts of clothing and they'll spend crazy amounts of money. And again, I genuinely am perfectly fine if individuals want to do that.
Yeah,
My point is just, I don't see the value in that.
yeah,
And like, I just it and then to say that that somehow makes you, I don't know, a more interesting person or a more with it person, like,
right.
no, I don't think so.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree entirely. All right. Did you have any other notes for chapter one?
No.
All right. I believe I had uh, a couple other notes. On page 3, um, we get this fun little thing where Lemony Snicket says he's describing all these different words. Uh, Instead, I'm sorry to say, you will find the words grief, despair, and woeful, as well as the phrases dark passageway, Count Olaf in disguise, and the Baudelaire orphans were trapped, plus an assortment of miserable words and phrases that I cannot bring myself to write down. He's describing words that will be in this book, and he
Yes.
cannot bring himself to write them down. It's like, aren't you going to have to write them?
Yes, I thought the exact same thing when I'm looking at this, going, but you're gonna write them. But he doesn't say I can't bring myself at this moment to write them down. He just says I can't bring myself to write them down, as if like
Yeah.
just kind of this definitive statement that he just can't do it. It's like, but clearly you will.
Yep. um, all right, and then hopping over to page 11, it's just at the bottom of the page, with Mr. Poe here. Well, I'm glad they did, Mr. Poe said. My name is Poe, and I have an appointment with Mr. and Mrs. Squalor to drop off their new children. It makes it sound like he's dropping off like a new car or something. Like it's just like they're just a piece of property, to be
Yes,
dropped off there.
absolutely. That description does end up with that that kind of um, I don't know, effect, but it also can be read differently, where it's like, well, did they have old children that they
Right.
disposed of?
Yes.
It opens up that possibility too.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so it's just very interesting word choice by Mr. Poe.
Yes. Well, and the other interesting word choice is like when he says, like at the top of page 13, which I had mentioned before, where he's like, where he says, "Dark is in, huh?" Mr. Poe said. "Wait until I tell my wife." I don't know what the hell that's supposed to mean.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. Um, it's very strange, although I will say in the Netflix series, not in the 2004 film featuring Jim Carrey, but in the Netflix series, then Mr. Poe is played by an African American.
Okay.
So that actually would be really interesting
Yeah.
to have him say "dark is in," huh? wait until I tell my wife.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, look, I'm in.
Right. Yes. I'm in.
I'm fashionable now.
Like, my skin tone is in.
Yeah. Because I know, like, I read it and I'm like, I don't know what else that means.
The only thing that I can think is that when he says Dark is in and his name is Mr. Poe, if it's like to do with Edgar Allan Poe, with
Mm,
Gothic literature, and Poe's got very dark themes to his stories, and
right.
Poe himself, like Edgar Allan Poe, had very dark hair, described things like the Raven, you know,
Right.
like I'm like, is that it? Like dark is in, Mr. Poe said, like Poe is all about like dark themes. That was the only
Mm,
other thing that I thought, but I definitely thought that too. Like what you had mentioned, I'm like, oh, that's cool that they got a black guy to play him because
yeah,
that line ends up being really fun.
absolutely.
Like,
Yeah.
I didn't know I was trendy. Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right, so those are the only notes that I had for chapter one.
Okay. Why don't you go first with chapter two?
Sure. All right, so my first note is on, let me see, page 20. Yes. So they're going up all these different, past all these different apartments, and they're hearing different things come from behind the doors. And so Lemony Snicket writes, when they reached the seventh floor, they heard two men laugh as somebody told a joke. When they reached the 12th floor, they heard the splashing of water as somebody took a bath. When they reached the 19th floor, they heard a woman say, "Let them eat cake," in a voice with a strange accent. So, "Let them eat cake." I'm sure you know that reference.
Yeah, it's Marie Antoinette.
Yes,
But it's apocryphal. Whether she actually said it or not is
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming the strange accent is supposed to be it's Marie Antoinette with a French accent. But
Yeah.
Marie, well, I guess it wouldn't be a French accent because she was Austrian, so it would have been with a
Mm.
German accent because she was, as best I remember, it's been a while since I've studied the French Revolution, but I'm pretty sure that she was Austrian and then she married Louis, who was French. So I don't know how old she was though when she came over from Austria, but she
Okay.
would have had some accent.
Yeah, yeah. So I definitely picked up that reference, and then I was like, well, is there something to these other two
Oh, good
uh,
call.
references? And so as the only thing that I can figure, because there's not much to go on with either of these,
Hmm.
the only thing that I can figure is that um, when they reached the 12th floor, they heard the splashing of water as somebody took a bath. Possibly Archimedes, who discovered the principles of buoyancy and volume in the bathtub, famously. That's the only thing that I can think of, and it's. I feel like I'm probably stretching there,
How
but
would
it
that,
could
but what
be.
does that have to do with the 12th floor?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that one.
Okay.
And then with the seventh floor, they heard two men laugh as somebody told a joke, and I found a book uh, with a reference to that. Um, Give me one second.
Hmm.
But again, it's pretty unusual. The book is titled "The Last Laugh," um, written by George Andrew Miller Jr. Actually, I'm not sure when this was released. But anyway, on page, according to Google, on page what is this, 168, I think. You don't have to keep on scaring me. We take the elevator up to the seventh floor, and oh man, it was here somewhere. Anyway, it was describing like laughter coming from the seventh floor. That's all I have.
How did you find this? Did you just Google laughter seventh floor?
Yes.
Oh, I wouldn't have even thought to do that.
Yeah. So I'm not sure because I feel like these are references that, um, at the very least, the Marie Antoinette one is very obvious. But
Yes,
I feel like the other two might have been kind of like inside jokes that Daniel
could
Handler
be.
could have put in here. And by inside jokes, I mean not just that he's the only one, or that, you know, it's a joke that he had with his friends, but
Hmm.
rather that he's the only one that actually knows what they mean.
Right. Right.
Uh,
That could be. I
yeah,
just interpreted it that it was essentially the rule of three in comedy, which is
yeah,
you have like normal, normal, and then funny. Like a
right.
normal example, and then just a really crazy out there one that it's like, yeah, you would hear that. Yeah, you would hear that. Wait, Marie Antoinette.
Right.
That's how I interpreted it, but you might be right. We've looked before at different allusions and references where we say, is that a reference? Is he alluding to something? And there's a lot of instances where we can't find anything, and it seems to be that he's not just embedding these books, just like everything's a reference or an allusion.
Hmm.
Um, so, which to me is a little disappointing. I feel like they would be much more rich if he maybe took a little bit more time and just stuffed these books full of things like that.
Right. Yeah.
But there's enough that you're suspicious every time you come across anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And there is another instance later on that we'll get into. Um, but yeah, that comes later, and I don't remember exactly where it is. But
Okay.
anyway, so I just thought that perhaps that was, you know, a couple of extra references thrown in there, but it
Yeah.
could just be the rule of three.
Right.
All right, so my next note for chapter two is on page 34. Um, and oh, yes, just this brief mention. They're looking down from the penthouse balcony on the town, obviously looking very small. And then uh, they, Lemony Snicket writes, they could see tiny colored shapes that looked like various insects, but were really all the cars and carriages in town. So it's very interesting that he's, you know, saying both cars and carriages,
Hmm.
that they're coexisting. Um, it just, yeah, adding to the confusion of when exactly this takes place or
Yeah,
where.
you're right. And it adds, I guess, I don't even know how I would describe these books, but they're taking place in some ill-defined or undefined time and place, and
Yeah,
just like they're not historically accurate.
right.
You've just got this blend of things. Because in the last book, then we had a very advanced computer, and then you've still got
Yes.
carriages on the street, unless it's supposed to be. Because I mean, I've been in communities where there's Mennonites or where there's Amish people, and you do have
Mm,
carriages that still do go down the streets, and even in like big cities, then you'll still see that with, you know, like in old Montreal, then you can go on a carriage ride with
right.
horses, like. So I don't know, but
Yeah.
it seems less like that and more like it's just this. Is it, you know, the 1910s? Is
Yeah.
it like the 1890s? Is
Yeah.
this the 1980s? Like when is this taking place?
Yeah. And I feel like it's very much inspired by, like not the time period, but this specific reference, I feel like is inspired by possible critiques that he could have had on the previous book.
Mm,
Um, by his editor or whomever, who just said like, "Wait, I thought that this was taking place in the past because we have all these references to steam
mm,
powered things, but now you're talking about an advanced computer." And so this might have been him just being like, "Eh."
right.
Just to clarify, there's no specific time
Yeah, just to
period.
clarify, I'm not going to be clear about this at all.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, so those are my only notes for chapter two.
Okay. And I actually don't have any notes for chapter 2. So,
Okay.
moving on.
Yeah.
Chapter 3, I'll go first.
Okay.
At the very beginning of chapter 3, then you do have a really good Snicket joke. This is like I would say
Absolutely.
it's a classic example of a Snicket joke
Hmm.
where he says if you were to take a plastic bag and place it inside a larger bowl, sorry, inside a large bowl, and then using a wooden spoon, stir the bag around and around the bowl, you could use the expression a mixed bag, so to describe what you had in front of you. but you would not be using the expression in the same way I'm about to use it now. Although a mixed bag sometimes refers to a plastic bag that has been stirred in a bowl, sometimes it does apparently. More often, it is used to describe a situation that has both good parts and bad parts. An afternoon at a movie theater, for instance, would be a mixed bag if your favorite movie were showing, but if you had to eat gravel instead of popcorn, you have to eat gravel? Can't you just say I won't eat anything then if that's all you're serving? But okay. A trip to the zoo would be a very mixed bag if the weather were beautiful, but all of the man and woman eating lions were running around loose. That'd be a very mixed bag, I suppose. Well, we had really good weather. However,
we did see a couple people being eaten.
right. Right.
Kind of threw off the mood.
And we lost our youngest, but we weren't that attached to him at that point. It's a good example of a Snicket joke where he does kind of get it, but he just gives such strange examples that, like, a kid who reads this, if they've never heard the expression a mixed bag, will ultimately understand the overall gist of it. They'll understand that it means both good and bad. Something that's got both good and bad. But these examples are so bizarre and they're very fun. And then my favorite part of it though is saying, well, there's the literal mixed bag where you mix a bag. And he's going, sometimes it refers to that. And it's definitely the kind of comedy that children love.
Right. Yes.
It's Amelia Bedelia, right? It's another example of that. It's just being very literal about an expression. And so I just thought that was fun.
Oh, absolutely. I have to just say my favorite part about this entire joke, for one thing, it's a little bit of a flip on the way that he usually does this, where he describes the literal meaning, like he gives an example before describing how he's going to use it. He doesn't say, oh, they were in a situation where it was a bit of a mixed bag, an expression which you might think means this. He doesn't do that. It's so fun that he jumps right in to this. If you take a plastic bag and place it inside a large bowl,
right,
and you're just like, where are you going with this? And then using a wooden spoon, very specific there.
It's all giving the impression that this is something that people do.
Right. Yeah.
It's very direct.
It can sometimes mean that.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I just found that delightful.
Yeah, it's a good one. It really is.
Yeah.
My next point is on from the bottom of page 38 to the top of page 39. Then it says, each morning after Esme left for work, Jerome would take the children to some of their favorite places in town. Violet was happy to see that her favorite exhibits at the Verne Invention Museum had not been changed, so she could take another look at the mechanical demonstrations that had inspired her to be an inventor when she was just 2 years old. Klaus was delighted to revisit the Akhmatova bookstore, where his father used to take him as a special treat to buy an atlas or a volume of the encyclopedia, and Sunny was interested in visiting the Pincus Hospital, where she was born, although her memories of this place were a little fuzzy. So a couple things. One, it is interesting that they do end up back in their home city, because I thought they were not ever going to return there. So they've got their favorite locations that they're returning to. And then I don't know if this is what you were referring to before, but we do have a couple allusions here. So like the Verne Invention Museum, I'm sure that's referring to Jules Verne, who's considered to be, like one of the, originators of science fiction. So that makes sense. And he had very like steampunk-ish inventions, like as these looking into the future descriptions. And then the Akhmatova bookstore. So I had to look that one up because I did not catch that reference, because I guess I'm not as up on my female Soviet poets as I thought I was.
Right.
So Akhmatova is a pen name for a female Soviet poet from the 1960s or so, I think is when she was really active, or maybe that was when she passed away. I'm not sure. I just remember seeing something about the 1960s. So
yeah, I did look it up. She I believe died in the 1960s.
Okay.
Her early work was, yes, I believe so.
Okay.
uh, 66 is when she
Oh, okay.
died. But yeah, she was most active from 1912 through 1925,
Oh,
and then
interesting.
again through 1936 until her death. Um, and
That's why
this
they
is according.
describe her as a Russian slash Soviet poet because she was writing as a Russian before it became the Soviet Union.
Mm, right. Yeah.
Because 1912 to 1925, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, because the Russian Revolution was 1917, so she was writing before it. So,
Gotcha. And this is according to Wikipedia. Her work was condemned and censored by Stalinist authorities,
makes
uh,
sense.
and she is notable for choosing not to emigrate and remaining in the Soviet Union, acting as witness to the events around her.
Damn.
Yeah, very brave woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Um, so very interesting references there.
Yeah, I
Uh,
don't even know what to do with that, like with that reference. I'm just okay.
right. Yeah. So just to go off of this a little bit, the only thing I could find in reference to the Pincus Hospital, because I'm like,
mhm.
if there are two references here, this third one has to be some kind of
That's what I
reference.
figured, but I don't know what it's referring to.
Yeah, so because it's related to Sunny, I searched up Pincus and teeth, and I did find that there was Dr. Charles Pincus, was primarily responsible for uh, for the oh man, what was it called? The individual responsible for inventing the Hollywood veneer, a removable snap-on cap that covered just the front of unsightly teeth or spaces.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, he lived from 1904 until 1986.
Well, I'm
Uh,
sure that's what it is.
yeah, yeah, but it's just such a random reference, especially considering that the other two are writers, and then this third one is, yeah.
You're right. I mean, the thing is, the Verne Invention Museum makes sense to me because it's not just Jules Verne was some random writer. It's that
Yeah, yeah.
he was a sci-fi writer who described futuristic like engineering and technology that is very much in the style of these books and what Violet would invent.
Mm,
But then I'm
right.
going, so I'm going, that makes so much sense. But the
Yeah.
Akhmatova reference, I'm like, what? Like, what about Klaus is like a female Soviet poet or like Russian poet who defied,
Yeah.
The
I
Stalinist regime?
I feel like it I know. I feel like it might be a remnant of um like something that Handler might have wanted to get into the austere academy uh in reference to Isadora, who is
Yes,
a poet.
yes.
Um, but yeah, very strange to see it associated with Klaus here.
That's the thing. Yeah, I agree because I was thinking about Isadora and her being a poet,
Mhm.
but I mean, maybe if she was named like Anastasia, then there'd be a
Mm,
little bit more because Anastasia was a member of the Tsarist family in Russia, right? And
right.
then
Yeah.
she disappeared slash went into hiding, exile. I don't know.
Mhm.
It's been a while since I've seen the Disney movie. Is it a Disney movie? I can't even remember. It might not be.
No, it's definitely not Disney. I believe it's Warner Brothers.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm
Uh,
not confident on that either.
all right. Let's move on. So, page, um, pages 48 to 49.
Mhm.
Then this is a really good instance. We've talked about this before about these books being very much didactic. They are teaching children how to read more sophisticated books than they've maybe encountered before, that pulling them
Mhm.
up in terms of vocabulary, different literary devices. This is what a metaphor is. This is how it functions. This is what foreshadowing is. This is how it functions. Here's an example of it, right? That he does that pretty often, and it seems to be for non-readers and instructing them to help them along in approaching a book that's maybe a little bit above their level. And this is just a good example of it. So he says towards the bottom of 48, If someone is excited, they will often put exclamation points at the ends of their sentences to indicate their excited tone of voice. If they say "oh," for instance, the exclamation point would indicate that the person is saying "oh" in an excited way, rather than simply saying "oh" with a comma after it, which would indicate that the present is somewhat disappointing. And so, obviously, people who are speaking don't put exclamation points or commas after utterances like that, but we have to express that in some way through punctuation when we're writing. So we've developed those particular pieces of punctuation to indicate those things. And so it's a funny way for him to describe it, that
Absolutely.
you know what I mean? If somebody were to say that, like, didn't you hear the exclamation point after the word I just said? As if like words are actual text.
Yeah.
But it's but it's very instructive, I think, for middle grade readers, if they don't know that already, that you have to pay attention to punctuation. And this is what an exclamation mark means, which I think kids would already know. But if you see that word that you think sounds exciting, but you don't see an exclamation mark after it, instead you see a comma, and then it just says something like, "Oh," Violet said as she opened her present, then you know she's not excited and her tone of voice is not excited, without the writer necessarily telling you that it's saying punctuation is tipping you off to the tone of voice. And I'm looking at that going, okay, that actually is, I appreciate that. And I think that that's probably helpful for kids. And it's a good instance of it to show that they are trying their best to say the right words to indicate that they're excited about these presents, but they can't get it into their voice.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the only note that I had for this chapter was on page 48. And yeah, just the idea of there are many, many things that are difficult in this life, but one thing that isn't difficult at all is figuring out whether someone is excited or not when they open a present. That's not difficult at all. Yeah, I just think that's kind of fun because it can be really easy to tell, but sometimes it's not at all. Sometimes it is very difficult to tell if somebody is genuinely excited by a present or not.
That
Because
is that's really true.
Yeah, we all put on, this, I don't want to let them know how disappointed I am. So it's always, this, "Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, this is great." And it's
Right.
like, no, it's not. Why did you get me this?
Right. Yeah, I wish there was some way out of that particular part of being a human.
Right.
The only thing that I've come up with, and you know this, that I have just made the decision, no one can give me a present ever. I'll just refuse it.
Yeah.
I just straight up refuse present because I'm like, I don't want to lie. I don't want to be in that position. That I don't know how many people are like me who have made that decision to just say, forget it. No one can gift me anything ever, because I don't want to be in that awkward position of saying, I don't enjoy this, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Thank you for wasting your money. I don't.
Yeah,
I have
absolutely.
other reasons behind it too. That's not the only reason, but
Yeah.
you are right that because people always try to react the same way, it's just whether it's sincere or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, all right, and then the next note that I have, and this is my last one for this chapter, is this is I guess I'll go from the bottom of 50 to the top of 51. So starting with that paragraph at the bottom of 50. "I know we discussed buying those silly items," Esme said with a wave of her long-nailed hand, "but tools have been out for weeks, almanacs have been out for months, and I received a phone call this afternoon informing me that large bronze squares are not expected to be in for at least another year." And I just thought that that was such a great um, critique there, that the rest of it I didn't find that incisive, but that part I go, that I actually think is a good statement,
Yeah.
because like, I don't know if it's just me, but doesn't it seem like the fashion industry is like, we just discovered this particular cut of fabric or this particular like thing, we've never used it before, seen it or used it in this particular combination, we just discovered it, and it's so fashionable because we're so excited about this new novel thing. uh, but This indicates, oh no, we know that it'll be popular then, like the commercialism
Yeah.
of it. And
Yeah.
it's like, but it's not in right now, so you can't even be ahead of the curve, ahead of the fashion industry.
Yeah.
It's just the entire thing is contrived, and
Absolutely.
I liked that part.
Yeah. Especially since it is such a unique thing. Large bronze squares.
Yeah, and I do like that it's not just about clothing. This
Yeah.
critique, it's everything that's trendy,
Yeah.
everything that's fashionable or unfashionable. I, I don't know. I mean, I guess anybody who it, like, I guess you're gonna have more of an issue with Handler than you'll have an issue with me. Like if if you really are into fashion and into trends and defend that entire like trendy um, approach to decorating and all of that, I just
Yeah.
have no patience. It seems that silly to me.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And jumping off that, like it's frustrating to me that something can be in fashion, and so that means that it is more expensive than it usually would
Oh
be.
yeah,
That is just, yeah, incredibly infuriating to me. I don't want to pay more for something just because, you know, just because companies are saying that, you should pay more for
creating
these.
false demand for it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to, spend too long on this, but it is an interesting point that because I have this criticism of the publishing industry because I think the publishing industry, um, far more so than Hollywood, it
Right.
chases trends like crazy, and you
Yeah.
legitimately. It's starting to change in the last few months. I've seen it, and it really, as far as I can tell, it does go according to this. Some bold person who's big enough in the industry will make some declarative statement that something is now in again, and then
Mhm.
agents get very, very excited about this, and then they'll start acquiring clients to match what is now in, what they expect to be in. So, for instance, um, vampires were incredibly popular with like the Twilight craze and all of these other things that came along with it,
Yeah.
especially within young adult. And then the market was saturated. They started to see the sales dip, and they're like, people are tired of vampires, is what the industry said. So then, for years now, vampires, no matter what it is, whether it's young adult, whether it's romance, like a romantic view of vampires, or horror, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Vampires are out. Zombies became a big thing.
Yeah.
Um, and so then recently I saw like somebody was like vampires are in, and then like where they're like, it was an editor I believe who tweeted out, I know this might sound crazy, but I'm ready to read vampire stuff again. Send me your stuff. So then agents are like, yay, I can't wait. I know that I've got a client who wrote this thing. And then like people are like tweeting at agents like crazy, going, oh, like, will you accept it now? Because you said that you weren't interested before. And like, I've got a vampire book. And they're like, I guess so. And I'm like, it really is that idiotic. It's so idiotic, but
Yes.
people in the industry act as though it makes sense. And that's the
Yeah.
thing. I'm going, you guys are deluding yourselves into thinking that there's order to chaos. This is completely arbitrary. You guys are the ones who are determining whether something's trendy or not. You're not letting the market, you're telling the market what's trendy and what's not. And
Yeah.
so for somebody like Handler, and the reason why I did want to go over that, for somebody like Handler who is, publishing books that look like this, you know
Hmm.
what I mean? That are not trendy.
Yeah.
This is an older style. Now, I guess that in and of itself is trend, like can be trendy, right?
Right. Yeah.
But for him to be writing books in a style like an antiquated style with this direct narrational approach, and the kids in these books don't have phones or gizmos and gadgets like video games and whatever else, and they're not doing cool things, they don't really have much of anything, right? That
Yeah.
it seems to be a rejection of trendy approaches that you get in the publishing industry.
Mhm.
And so I think that kind of makes sense why he would write a book like this. And
Absolutely.
I don't know if he has ever been frustrated by the publishing industry in the way it does that. It has that approach with trends and what they can and can't publish because they think this is in, this is not in. But I
Mhm.
kind of suspect that's maybe what's going on here.
Yeah. No, I would agree entirely. Yeah, it is. It's so true because yeah, these books are not um, not particularly trendy in terms of how they look or anything like that. They are, yeah, they are written in the antiquated style. Um, yeah, absolutely. So I think that these books having a critique of trendiness is, yeah, it is very appropriate.
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
and yeah, and it's not to say that, other works can't do that sort of criticism, but it is, yeah, very interesting. And you have to imagine that, that Handler had to have some kind of um, personal experience with trends, not necessarily in the publishing world, but in some way. Then
Right.
he has been frustrated uh, by the trends.
Yes. Yeah, it definitely seems that way. Yeah. Um, all right, so that's all that I had with chapter 3, and then I've only got one note for chapter 4.
All right. I also only have one note for chapter 4, um, and I have no other notes for chapter 3.
Okay,
um, Wait, I guess I will go first for chapter 4.
sure.
Uh, Top of page 60.
I knew it.
Um,
We have the same note.
yeah, we've been doing this entire time,
Yeah,
just with this book.
yeah.
um, yes, this discussion of the elements and the
Yep.
one element that you will not find on the periodic table is the element of surprise.
Yeah, there's that, which is fun, but I love his description of aluminum. So he's like, which is found in, like, talking about oxygen, which is found in the air, to the element aluminum, which is found in cans of soda. Right? Because it's an aluminum can of soda, and the fact that, like,
Right.
aluminum is in the can, not it is the
Right.
can. I love that.
Yes.
Like, some kids like, I'm drinking aluminum.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
And you are right. The element of surprise is the other thing that I've got on there. And I had one other note for this section. Then he does use the word sneaked instead of
Oh,
snuck,
yes. Yeah. And we had just talked about this
because
before.
he used snuck in the last book. Snicket did, but the
Yeah.
characters who do know the difference, who know that snuck is officially not a word, then they'll use the word sneaked. But then it seems like Snicket was like, I'm not going to bother with using the proper word when it doesn't sound right. But now he is using the proper past tense of sneak.
Yeah. I know. I did pick up on that as well, and I was surprised by it. Um, yeah, I don't really know what to say about
Me
it.
neither.
Maybe he learned from reporting on the children from his
Yeah.
previous
You think
experience.
that's
I
it?
don't
Or you think he just alternates and he's just like, "Meh."
know. Yeah, I honestly cannot say.
Yeah, I can't say either. Um, so, yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty good discussion then for the first 4 chapters. I don't, um, I'll say that, like, just kind of broadly, I like the fact that we've got Olaf in here much earlier in the book, because we've had a couple
Hmm.
books where he doesn't show up until really late.
Yeah,
And I like the fact that you've got kind of hanging over all of this what happened to the Quagmire
yeah,
triplets. Where are they? Are they okay? And they're very concerned that if Olaf is there, then what does that mean about the overall wellness of, um, what's his name? Duncan? Is that it?
uh,
Why
yeah.
am I thinking?
Duncan and Isadora.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, so I like that part, and this
hmm,
does make a lot of sense. Like, you can see, I mean, unless I'm like, just falling for it, but he definitely is setting us up to believe that with Olaf posing as Gunther or Gunther, with him
yeah,
posing as this guy, he's going to convince Esme that the orphans are so in that there is so much demand that she needs to auction them, and then he'll be able to then
right.
purchase them, and then he'll be their guardian, and then he can somehow get their fortune from that. Um, that
Yeah.
seems to be like what's happening here, which I
Yeah,
mean, I
that's
guess
that's a fair. interpretation.
I like the plan because I feel like it's going to generate a lot of comedy because it's going to be him convincing her that this is the reasonable thing to do, that it is reasonable to auction off the children because orphans are in. And I just
Right.
think that that's a very funny conversation, that you can get a lot of comedy out of that. So I'm going, I hope that's where it goes. And ultimately, like, that's what I want, is, in these books, I want contrived scenarios that are going to generate comedy.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no, absolutely. Um, yeah, no, as I had mentioned, this is one of my favorites out of the entire series. I really enjoy this book. We're going to be going to Cafe, either Salmonella or Salmonella. I'm not sure which, but the waiters are dressed like salmon,
yeah,
as you
I
can
know.
see in
I'm
that
looking at chapter
picture.
5 right now, and I don't know how they get around because they've got like the mermaid feet.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and all this discussion of, what's in, what's not. This idea about the elevator, which, is clearly being shown on the front cover. It's the
Right.
title of the book, but elevators are out. Um, yeah, so a lot of really fun stuff going on here, and yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? I think we've been talking so long that what is it? 3/4 zip sweaters are out, and
Oh
plaid is
no.
back in.
Oh dear. All
Yeah,
right, I gotta get this off then.
yeah, because this is humiliating, Tyler. Like
It's true. It really is.
yeah, you're embarrassing yourself.
Oh dear.
You've got to
Don't
chase
worry. By next podcast, I'll be back to plaid.
right, unless it goes out again.
Right.
Yeah. Well, this is
Oh.
the perfect place to stop it right there with your face just stuck in the sweater. Glasses off of the face. That's the thumbnail. We've got it. Got it, folks. All right. Unless you have anything else, then we're done.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, folks. Thank you so much for watching. If you're wearing a sweater, you better put on something plaid instead. And we'll see you
Yep.
next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Bye.
Ignore the tattoo! A phrase here which means like, comment, subscribe, and share this podcast across the web. That may seem like a strange definition, but in this context, it is entirely accurate.